Penguin Random House Audio presents Biased, Uncovering the Hidden Prejudice That Shapes What We See, Think, and Do by Jennifer L. Eberhardt, Ph.D. For my love, Rick, who inspires me to do more and to move further than I ever thought I could. A journey is called that because you cannot know what you will do with what you find, or what you find will do to you. James Baldwin. Introduction. I walked in through a sea of navy blue uniforms. The auditorium was filled to capacity, with 132 sworn members of the Oakland Police Department sitting motionless, with perfect posture, erect, arms crossed. As I walked down the aisle to take the stage, I could not see their faces, but I already knew what they were thinking. The road to this particular presentation was a long one. The police force was still recovering from a major scandal that had left a legacy of distrust in the community. I was just wrapping up a 2-year report that was about to be released to the public, one of the final steps required by the federal oversight team brought in to investigate extensive civil rights violations by members of this department. And I didn't want the police to be blindsided by our findings. Many in the community were calling for an end to racial profiling. They wanted fair treatment. They were demanding justice. Many in the police department felt they were delivering that justice every day, sometimes at great sacrifice. I wanted to help the officers to understand the insidious ways in which implicit bias could act on human decision-making, despite the officers' noble intentions and deliberate efforts. Reporters were pressuring me to discuss our findings before the report was released, but I couldn't. There was too much at stake. I first wanted the department to be prepared and to be willing to work with our team as they crafted solutions to any problems the report would reveal. I was tired, exhausted, really, from working on the report around the clock for months, to the neglect of my teaching, my husband, and our 3 sons. As I marched up the aisle, I could feel a chill in the room. I made it to the stage. Although not exactly as modern or as high-tech as the classrooms at Stanford where I normally taught, the auditorium, with its wood-paneled walls and rows of cushioned red metal chairs, seemed familiar enough. I looked out at the faces in the crowd, searching for a connection. I found every face expressionless, their eyes distant. Each officer wore a crisp, clean uniform over a bulletproof vest. At the waist was a duty belt holding the essential tools of their trade: handcuffs, taser, OC pepper spray, and Glock 17 9mm firearm. The officers looked ready for duty, but no one seemed ready to engage with me. For the first time in my career, I was facing a hostile crowd. There was no booing or yelling. There were no verbal complaints of any kind, just a steely silence that was more eloquent than any words. I tried to make a few jokes. Nothing landed. I led them through an interactive shoot-don't-shoot simulation, which was always a crowd pleaser. The exercise fell flat. I showed a few movie clips that in other places triggered bursts of laughter. Still nothing. Finally, I caught the eye of LaRon Armstrong, a captain whom I'd worked with before on trainings designed to improve police-community relations. I knew he understood the importance of delivering this message to law enforcement. I was relieved to see his face, until I realized that his expression was one of concern for me. He was looking around the crowd with the same worry I was trying not to let show on stage. I saw him shifting uncomfortably in his seat. How, I wondered, can I possibly deliver this training 10 more times to units across the department when I'm not really sure I can make it through this first session? Eventually, I stopped with the lessons and the data graphs and the images and the jokes and the movie clips. I decided to veer off my usual script and share a personal story. I explained that some years ago, my son Everett and I were on a plane. He was 5 years old, wide-eyed, and trying to take it all in. He looked around and he saw a black passenger, and he said, "Hey, that guy looks like Daddy." I looked at the man, and truth be told, he did not look anything like Daddy, not in any way. I looked around for anyone else Everett might be referring to, but there was only one black man on the plane. I couldn't help but be struck by the irony, the race researcher having to explain to her own black child that not all black people look alike. But then I paused, and I thought about the fact that kids see the world differently from adults. Maybe Everett was seeing something that I missed. I decided to take another look. I checked the guy's height. No resemblance there. He was several inches shorter than my husband. I studied his face. There was nothing in his features that looked familiar. I looked at his skin color. No similarity there either. Then I looked at his hair. This man had dreadlocks flowing down his back. Everett's father is bald. I gathered my thoughts and turned to my son, prepared to lecture him in the way that I might inform an unobservant student in my class. But before I could begin, he looked up at me and said, "I hope that man doesn't rob the plane." Maybe I didn't get that right. "What did you say?" I asked him, wishing I had not heard what I heard. And he said it again, as innocently and as sweetly as you can imagine from a bright-eyed boy trying to understand the world. "I hope he doesn't rob the plane." I was on the brink of being upset. "Why would you say that?" I asked as gently as I could. "You know Daddy wouldn't rob a plane." "Yes," he said. "I know." "Well, why did you say that?" This time my voice dropped an octave and turned sharp. Everett looked up at me with a really sad face and said, very solemnly, "I don't know why I said that. I don't know why I was thinking that." Just telling that story reminded me of how much that moment hurt. I took a deep breath, and when I looked back out at the crowd in the auditorium, I saw that the expressions had changed. Their eyes had softened. They were no longer uniformed police officers, and I was no longer a university researcher. We were parents, unable to protect our children from a world that is often bewildering and frightening. A world that influences them so profoundly, so insidiously, and so unconsciously that they and we don't know why we think the way we do. With a heavy heart, I continued with my point. We are living with such severe racial stratification that even a 5-year-old can tell us what's supposed to happen next. Even with no malice, even with no hatred, the Black Crime Association made its way into the mind of my 5-year-old son, into all of our children, into all of us. I finished the training and invited the audience to come up to ask questions or share their stories.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?